In my original Ghost of Tsushima review, one of the things I mentioned was that while the combat was fun and deeper than the original marketing led me to believe, there wasn't quite enough of it for my taste. Some of the best missions in the game were charging into battle with your allies, and once you've completed everything, you couldn't reset any camps to fight people again, so you'd be left to beat up random Mongols on the roads like an angry highway goblin. Well, the free online update Ghost of Tsushima Legends promised to satisfy the angry homeless person inside of me, as it introduced a stylish, fantastical survival mode, along with co-op missions, a loot system, and other RPG related bullshit that game developers are hard for right now. Now, if you saw my original Ghost of Tsushima review, it's a pretty exclusive club. Thanks for clicking on that Facebook link, Mum. You know I'm coming at this from the perspective of someone who likes good single player games. The multiplayer has your standard 2020 fare of surface level RPG loot and unlockable aesthetics, comparable to stuff like Destiny or The Division, which I've admittedly never really been into. I play games for story-driven escapism mainly, and while I'll admit the short stints I've had with those games have been fun, they're all tail-ended with a very real emptiness that I could be doing something more important with my day than unlocking another gun that's blue and has plus 3% arse resistance. So keep that in mind. You know, if you do enjoy those games, you can disagree with me, put some death threats in the comments, and enjoy this video. The thing that struck me first about Legends is the unique aesthetic. It has this dreary, almost horrific atmosphere to it, as all your missions are supposed to be tales of past Ghosts of Tsushimas, as told by this spooky wizard I've forgotten the name of. They all have this unique Swedish progressive metal album cover look to them, and while it's a very strong look, it's most of what you're going to be seeing. The original single player has some of the best art direction on the PS4, and a good amount of environmental variety as well. But if you want to play any of the multiplayer, I hope you like Red and Black. It's such a strong look that it can even take away from customization at times. Depending on the level, your gold and silver armour can end up looking more like dark red and not quite as dark red armour. It's a neat look to start off with, but the roulette table colour scheme can get a bit overbearing after a while. Let's talk about the characters in combat, since it'll be the first thing you run into if you come from the single player. You've got 4 different Power Rangers you can play as in Legends: Samurai, Archer, Furry, and Sunday Morning Bathrobe Man. They all have the same basic movesets, but different ultimate abilities. 2 of them do the exact same thing, allow you to kill people quickly. One allows you to kill people quickly from far away.
Yours brought destruction from afar.
And the most useful, I think, allows you to revive your teammates. They also have powers that are on cooldowns and can be activated every once in a while. The Samurai lets you drain enemies' health with their sword. The Hunter lets you fire an arrow that will stun enemies. The Ronin summons a spirit doggo, which other players can pet, and yes, objectives will be ignored to pet him. And the Stealth Boy can throw a poison smoke bomb that staggers enemies. As well as these powers, as you complete missions with each character, you can unlock new abilities. Pretty exciting, I thought. Do all these missions and get new abilities as well as new gear. But after a while, I made a disappointing realisation. It's not quite as freeing as that. What you're looking at right now aren't all the upgrades you can choose at once. These are all the upgrades you can choose between. You can only use 3 of these at a time, which was one of the early warnings I got of the not very perfect RPGification of Ghost's gameplay. Much like Heaven Strike, which is an ability you're used to using all the time in a single player, that is taken away to be redistributed as an unlockable, Legends likes to be quite restrictive with the fun abilities you do get to pick between. Where great RPGs let you pick between lots of interesting abilities and lets you combine them into your own personal and powerful experience, Legends restricts you to sparse interesting options you're forced to pick between. You're limited very much to what you're given and not your own creativity. Case in point, in Legends you can no longer switch between stances. Yeah, that thing that is like 60% of what makes the combat fun and interesting, you can't do it. Well, not to start off with anyway. Your default sword can only be used in stone stance. As you unlock more loot, you'll get swords that you can use other stances, but only those stances. Some let you use more than one, and I found out there is a sword that uses more than 2 stances at once, but it's legendary, which means much like what I thought of vaginas when I was a teenager, they're so rare you probably won't even know they exist. Why did I write that? That was not worth it. Which is just so arbitrary. I hate that stuff. Like, what's stopped me from holding a sword differently? Oh, because we're in RPG now. Like, the most fun and complex part of the combat is flowing between stances as you go from enemy type to enemy type. It's arguably the best part of the single player, and I expected the multiplayer to be an expansion on that, but it's not. It takes away mechanics you've spent dozens of hours getting used to, so they can split up essential and fun utility into different unlockables. So it's frustrating not being able to stun or get through blocking enemies in the way you're used to, even though you've done it for hours and hours in the single player. You know how to do it, but the game says you're not allowed to, because you've got the Megalock sword and not the Lego sword. Okay Jordan, well how about the loot then? Well, it's kinda a mixed bag. You have 2 slots for ghost weapons, and only appear to get 3 options per slot. The weapons you can obtain differ a bit between classes. For the samurai at least you can get smoke bombs, healing gourds and caltrops. Then in the other slot you've got kunai, sticky bombs, and sand. Huh? This is where my point about RPG-ness getting in the way of fun again comes up. So you might get lucky, like I did, and get a bunch of items that synergize into a build, maybe a charm that increases ghost weapon damage that has a larger area of effect and longer stun duration. Okay, pretty cool. That's the type of RPG stuff I do like, but gear you obtain also has a power level. Okay, so if I want to make my character stronger and do hard missions, I have to sacrifice lower power level interesting gear for more boring high power level gear. Thankfully the higher you go, the less those power levels seem to matter, and the more creativity can be useful. Still, it can feel like you're going backwards sometimes when you need to throw away your old toys if you want to be strong enough to get new ones. There's also some quite interesting legendary gear, at least that's what this wiki page is telling me. In my experience, legendary gear is so extremely rare that no matter how high level you are, you're very unlikely to see it. So even if you have your character maxed out, you're just as likely to be given 5 pieces of standard blue equipment that you'll instantly dismantle. The legendary gear has some creative effects that I've been looking for. A sword that lets you use all stances. Kinda wish that was the default, but you know, we've dug our fucking bed, so we're gonna sit in it. What's the phrase? Other stuff I've seen online is pretty neat, like a bow that ricochets headshots, that's pretty cool. But then of course if you're me, the only legendary thing you got was a pair of cufflinks that gives me plus 15% bonus damage at max health. Thanks. I might not have been as put off by this if this restrictive gear was used to encourage co-op. Like say, before you start any match, it'll tell you what other players' characters have equipped with what stances, so you can choose a character that complements what other players are lacking, like Overwatch, to keep things balanced. But when you join a match, you're just thrown in, which means when you're playing on Nightmare, the hardest difficulty, you will often join a match, everyone will look at each other's stats in the menus, and then just leave. It was very creative of the devs to simulate my childhood playground experience in-game, but dare I say it doesn't make for a very good multiplayer experience. But what is it you do with all your characters and gear? Well, Legends is split into 2 categories. You've got the story mode that are co-op missions, and survival missions where you take on an allegory for the year's events in Mongol form. Story missions are fairly light on the story. It's kind of like the way Vermintide or Left 4 Dead missions have stories. They're just excuses for you to be doing what you're doing, quietly becoming background noise to all the horrible death you're inflicting on the world. There aren't any characters you'll meet, apart from notably the guy who wielded the longbow you get in the single player, which is admittedly a very nice touch and I like it, but most names mentioned are just vague, omniscient bad guys that will be referenced as missions progress. Although an interesting thought occurred to me while playing. Listening to the vague flavour dialogue your characters do have between each other, it sounded to me like they're just pitch-shifted versions of Masako and Ishikawa from the single player.
Stronger together.
The samurai is never caught by surprise.
So is the multiplayer supposed to be you playing as younger versions of them through a fantasy lens, telling the tales of their past achievements? No, probably not. I'm sure it was just sucker punch trying to save money. But I do wish they'd put all their eggs into that basket and went with it, considering the characters are one of the game's strongest aspects. Proper character dialogue and interesting missions would really boost what is surface level. Go do the thing with Wise Man ASMR.
Inside, they made a grisly discovery.
Functioning essentially as the epilogue to the story missions are the raids. Honestly, I'm not quite sure how they work or why they're called raids. Like, I get it's a reference to old MMOs like WoW, but what makes a raid? It's just a hard co-op mission that rotates out each week. Is there something about it that makes it different? If I played WoW, would I get it? Does this man understand that his calligraphy would look better if he was not wearing a blindfold? I have a lot of questions. The raids are only available on the 4th and highest difficulty, Nightmare, which has a minimum recommended power level of 100, and any death will fail the mission. From what I've been able to see in my extensive testing so far, yeah, it looks pretty cool. One major problem why I haven't gotten very far is you cannot matchmake in them. Yeah, as if the pain of being alone wasn't enough by itself, the game will smack you in the face if you don't have a wee gamer buddy all set up and ready to help. I understand the idea is that it's hard to do without proper communication, but why stop people from trying in the first place? Surely I've got a better chance than just by myself. Sucker Punch seem really insistent on reminding me how alone I am with this multiplayer. I don't know why, like what do you think I've got a dad for? Legends tries to spice up some gameplay by having slightly more fantastical mechanics that you'd expect seeing giant upside down hearts floating in the air and all. Things like colour coordinated enemies that you need to absorb the right colour to defeat, or enemies that heal soldiers in an area, or guys who vomit birds and are an awful pain in the arse to avoid, much like any real life man who would vomit birds on you. But complaints aside, the story missions are a really good excuse to just do some cool ninja stuff with friends. If you have any, that is, and your best friend didn't buy an Xbox 2 generations in a row. But Jordan, you skinny bitch, what's the survival mode like? Well, A, while accurate, that was uncalled for, and B, let me say, there's this golden rule in art, right? I think movies, stand-up, whatever it is, that always leave your audience wanting more. You might think you want more, but 27 seasons, no, I looked up, it's 32 now. 32 goddamn seasons of The Simpsons, or the Hobbit movie that turned into 3 insanely drawn out sexy dwarf expeditions proved otherwise. I bring this up because while the combat in this game is fun, it's not 30 minutes straight fun, it's not 40 minutes straight fun, and god damn it, it's not 55 minutes straight fun. You've got 4 difficulties in Legends, and as well as making enemies stronger in survival mode, it also increases the number of waves you have to fight. Even on the easiest difficulty, one match of survival will take about 30 minutes to complete. In survival mode, there are 3 points that need to be defended, enemies run towards them to capture them, and you kill them. And that's kinda it. There's no other objectives, apart from optional things that are too awkward to do most of the time, and don't reward you with more loot anyway, so who cares. I know it sounds like I'm simplifying it, but just look at the footage. The game kind of misleads you as well, because not only do the waves increase, but each wave is in fact about 2 to 3 waves of enemies that spawn over the entirety of the map. And while Legends has great enemy variety, the addition of Oni, sort of demonic interpretations of enemies you fought before, are great additions. The sheer number of enemies you fight and the lack of being able to switch stances to accommodate for the variety means that they tend to blend together after a while. Times these survival waves by 15 or more, and the more you play, the more you realise that fighting is 30% and the other 70% is just running back and forth. And it's not terrible, it's just not really interesting enough to keep your attention for more than 20 minutes. And when you reach the higher difficulties, 45 plus minutes of this just to be given subpar loot just feels like an insult to your time. They try to put in little boosts to keep it fresh. When you kill enemies you get Pokemon water mana? I don't know what these are supposed to be. They let you buy little power-ups around the map, but it's pretty basic stuff, things like light enemies in fire, regenerate your health, and my favourite, summon a petable spirit bear, but they don't add much considerable depth. So while survival mode can be enjoyable, the time investment will probably be too much for a lot of people. It's much more fun to play a mission or two of co-op levels than play one survival session where you'll begin to get burnt out after about 20 minutes.
A foe can't be beat!
The multiplayer, ideally, should be a power fantasy expansion on the single player with friends, and sometimes it is, but in many places it holds you back arbitrarily, denying you abilities that you've been used to for dozens of hours if you played the single player. Add to this some hit and miss gear and a very drawn out survival mode, it can be easy to get worn out. But in spite of these things, the core gameplay loop is still engaging enough that co-op missions give a fun, well-paced experience. If you can get an interesting build and a friend to coordinate with, there's little to complain about. I think at its best, this is a very enjoyable way to spend a co-op evening with a friend, and at its worst, it's a grindy slog through some drawn out survival stages. You know, without trying to sound too hard like a football manager, you know, at the end of the day, we gotta think about the players. At the end of the day, it is just free, I guess, but I do think it's a shame how it feels like artificially hamstrung for the sake of like RPG-ness, especially considering that all of this is free. Like, there's no microtransactions. So why they didn't just go insane power fantasy, have fun, vomit your own birds on other guys, I'll never understand. So conclusion, is Ghost of Tsushima Legends worth playing? It's alright. I hope you guys enjoyed. I got an awesome response from the upstairs. They loved the video. I got an awesome response from my last video, has like 2,000 views, which I know in the grand scheme of the internet and YouTube, it's fucking LOL. You know, there's a video of a cat vomiting the other day that had like 20 million views. But to be honest, it was pretty high quality content. But I'm very happy that people enjoyed all the hard work I put into that, because I probably put too much work into these. You might be able to notice, what's that in the background? I mean, it's a box. It's obviously a box. It's a box for a PS5. Oh yeah, I was quite lucky. And I got a PS5, and I'm enjoying it a good bit, and I have some thoughts. So I will make a video on what I think of that. So I look forward to talking about the PS5 and how fucking huge it is, man. It looks like the mothership from Independence Day. I hope you guys enjoyed this. So if you think this is cool, please show it to your pals or other people you think might be interested. If people aren't gonna care about it, don't fucking, don't be a bad boy. And I will see you guys. Well, I won't. That's not how a video works. But you guys will see me next time.